Greetings, students, and welcome to week 11. This week we're talking about social scholarship. We'll look at credibility and evaluation through a different lens, through the academic lens. We'll look at the open access and open data movements. We'll take a look at collaborative information seeking in the academic community. We'll look at the various different types of research impact. We'll look at social scholarship, the altmetrics movement, and we'll also look at gray literature. Our essential questions for the week include: what are open access and open data, and how do they impact social scholarship? How has research impact traditionally been measured? What are new strategies for measuring impact? What is gray literature, and how does it fit in the equation? And what will the Academy embrace alternative metrics and strategies for research impact? To better understand the academic world and the need for academics to publish and research impact, take a look at Marky's little video that you'll find here in our slides and also on our playlist. Marky emphasizes the need for librarians and information professionals to understand research impact. She says, library users search citation databases not only to find relevant sources on topics, but to access the research impact of a particular journal article, or a particular researcher's publication record. Especially interested in research impact are college and university faculty who participate in employment, tenure, and promotion decisions. Before we move further in our exploration of social scholarship, let's look at some vocabulary. A referee journal is a journal subject to a detailed peer review following a defined formal process according to a uniform set of criteria and standards. Peer review itself is the process of using predetermined reviewers or ad hoc reviewers who individually read a submitted manuscript and prepare a written review. A single blind peer review is one in which the identity of the viewer is not revealed to the author or authors. A double-blind peer review is a review in which the authors and the reviewers both remain anonymous. A systematic review is a rigorous literature review, usually in the health sciences, based on a clearly articulated research question that identifies all relevant published and unpublished studies, assesses each of the study's qualities, and synthesizes the research and interprets and summarizes the research findings. A literature review is an evaluative report of what is known about a subject, theme, current event, issue, etc., that strives to be comprehensive in certain ways. For example, covering a certain range of years, a certain genre, a certain methodology. And you'll find lit reviews very often, pretty much essentially, in dissertations and very often in scientific studies. Gray literature is a growing body of literature, of academic literature, that has not been formally published. It's produced more quickly and more flexible than the traditional peer review process, and it is a response to the issues relating to the control of commercial publishing. It can be challenging to find because it's not always included in the databases that we know and love. It may be found in Scopus, Web of Science, CINAHL, ProQuest dissertations, and theses. Gray literature is useful because it includes documents from nonprofits, non-governmental organizations, associations, think tanks, research groups, government, industry, and community groups. It comes in the form of white papers, patents, working papers, preprints, dissertations, handbooks, syllabi, conference proceedings, poster abstracts, government and other reports, and unpublished clinical reports. Gray literature may be more up-to-date than literature that has gone through the traditional publishing process. It may provide new or additional perspectives on a topic. Of course, it needs to be evaluated, as does any source that you use, but especially because it hasn't been vetted. Among the places that you're going to find gray literature, some of our old friends like USA.gov, clinicaltrials.gov, and ERIC, but there are also some special portals and sometimes search tools for finding great literature, and they're listed here, and these are hyperlinked, and I hope that you choose to take a look at some of them and see their value. Another strategy, of course, as you learned, you can search for PDFs and other formats of documents by using Google file types. And the colon PDF would probably be useful here, but you can be creative about how you might search for these. So let's look at some trends in scholarly research. There is a shift away from a research culture where data and research products are considered as private assets and to a culture in which they are public goods. There's a growth of multidisciplinary research. We're developing common standards for communicating data and research. We're mandating an intelligent openness for data relevant to published scientific papers. And we're expanding the criteria used to evaluate research to give credit for useful research communications and novel ways to communicate. Among the movements that you'll see in terms of our trends are the open access movement, the altmetrics movement, and the open data movement. Open access is the unrestricted access to peer-reviewed scholarship on the open web. It's interesting, according to SPARC, the Scholarly Publishing and Academic Resources Coalition, that even though research is largely produced with public dollars by researchers who share it freely, the results are often hidden behind technical, legal, and financial barriers. Open access presents a new model for scholarly publishing, with unrestricted online access to articles published in scholarly journals. It permits users to download, copy, print, display, search, and link to information. It presents barrier-free access, removing price barriers like subscriptions, licensing, or pay-per-view fees. It removes permission barriers and most copyright and licensing restrictions. Among the principles of open access are that research data, when it's repurposed, has an accretive value or the value increases. Public funded research should be public available and for the public good. Transparency in research is essential to sustain the public trust. The validation of research data by the peer community is an essential function of the responsible conduct of research. And managing research data is the responsibility of a broad community of stakeholders, including researchers, funders, institutions, libraries, archivists, and the public. There are actually two types of open access content. There is gold open access and green open access. Gold open access is delivered by journals that make all peer-reviewed articles freely available for online as soon as they're published, generally referred to as open access journals. Green open access is open access delivered by repositories or peer-reviewed articles deposited in open digital repositories, including articles not copy-edited or formatted. What makes open access possible is that authors are the copyright holders for their work until or unless they transfer their rights to someone else, like a publisher. Scholarly journals generally don't pay authors for their research articles, which frees this special tribe of authors to consent to open access without losing revenue. Among the benefits of open access, OA benefits authors as well as readers. All authors want to cultivate a larger audience and greater impact. Open access increases a work's visibility, retrievability, audience usage, and citations, which all convert to career building, especially on the part of an academic. Readers can freely access scholarly articles to read, copy, download, distribute, print, search, or link to the full texts of those articles. Super discusses the scope of open access content. It is not limited to the sciences. It extends to the arts and the humanities as well. It's not limited to publicly funded research, but includes privately funded and unfunded research as well. It's not limited to present and future publications, but also includes past publications. It's not limited to born digital work, but includes work digitized from print, microfiche, film, and other media. It's not limited to text, but also includes data, audio, video, multimedia, and executable code. Among the places where you can find open access content is the Open Directory of Open Access Journals, which is a wonderful international portal, the Public Library of Science, and Sage Open. This is a screenshot of DOAJ, and it's very searchable and has some very interesting journals in it. And one of my favorites is First Monday, which deals with web and technology and information studies. Among the other efforts where people are sharing on the web in terms of scholarship is the DIRT Digital Tools Portal. And that is a registry of tools for scholarly use. And DIRT makes it easy for scholars and others who are conducting research to find the types of tools they need to do the kinds of research they want. So, what are the tools for analyzing data, for archiving data, for organizing data, preserving data, collaborating? It's another example of collaborative scholarship. Still, other examples include ORCID, which offers researchers a persistent digital identifier that distinguishes the researcher from every other researcher when folks are coming in contact with him or her. And so you can register for your ORCID number, and you can add your ORCID number to your research and any of your profiles, including on your website, and you can use it when you apply for grants. Beyond open access, you'll find that folks are figuring out ways to make journal articles that are behind paywalls available in both legal and some illegal ways. One legal approach is called Unpaywall. You can install a free browser extension for Firefox or Chrome and search legally across full text research papers from a large index. It's like at this point, it's largely science focused, and it does not retrieve articles 100% of the time. Once you load the browser button, once you hit an article abstract, on the right side of the screen, you'll see either a little gray tab or a green tab. If you see a green tab, then that means that the article is available in full text. This was developed by Impact Story, which you will see later in the altmetrics discussion. And Impact Story is a nonprofit working to make science more open and reusable online, and it's supported by grants from the National Science Foundation and the Sloan Foundation. You will also find ways to, once you have the DOI for an article, you can try to find it using Open Access DOI, and there is a box for that with an Open Access button where you can paste in either the article URL, the DOI, or the PMID. And this should discern whether or not an open access copy is available. And now moving on to the less than legal options. This is kind of a pirated interlibrary loan approach, and it is merely the Twitter hashtag #IHasPDF. And you'll see if you just paste that into a Twitter search that folks are out there saying, I need the PDF for this article, and then they're arranging how to send it to each other. And so this is kind of a way to bypass library interlibrary loan. I wonder how many librarians are using it. Check it out and see what you think. And then finally, in this category, it's important to know about Sci-Hub. Sci-Hub is an online search engine which has nearly 60 million academic papers. And these are available for direct download. This completely bypasses any publisher paywalls and journal paywalls. New papers are loaded when they're accessed, and papers are stored in a repository. It was founded by a graduate student from Kazakhstan in 2011 as a reaction to the high cost of research papers. And it has been legally contentious ever since. There have been copyright lawsuits brought against Sci-Hub, and it has cycled through a number of domains and been blocked in some areas. It is highly controversial, but it is very, very popular among grad students. What you'll find is that grad students who have access to universities, of course, in the West, are bypassing their university libraries because they find it so much easier to get access to articles in this one repository. And you'll also discover this addresses an issue in equity. Not everybody has access to a university library, and a lot of people rely on research articles. And so Sci-Hub fills an extraordinarily big demand, and yet it is not legal. So I want you to think about these issues as we move forward and as you move into practice. Let's move on to open data. Open data is freely available on the internet, permitting any user to download, copy, analyze, reprocess, pass to software, or use for any purpose without financial, legal, or technical barriers other than those inseparable from gaining access to the internet itself. Open data is data that has value as evidence, reproducibility of results for validation, and utility for future research. In terms of background, open data is about promoting collaboration, transparency, accountability across organizational and disciplinary boundaries that we often saw before data was open. It enables large-scale data collections in research communities and challenges individual researchers' autonomy in managing and using data. It's gaining increasing attention because of its benefits to publishing and because of its disclosing data for advancing scholarship. Bolton et al. Talk about 4 facets of open data. They suggest that it's accessible, it can be readily found, intelligible, it must provide an account of the results of the scientific work that is intelligible to those wishing to understand them. It's accessible. Recipients need to be able to make some judgment about or assessment about what's communicated, and it is reusable. It should be able to be reused for multiple purposes. A lot of scientists believe that open data is an urgent issue if we're going to solve some of the problems of the world. In Science as an Open Enterprise, Bolton et al. Describes open data as an urgent issue and a realizable aspiration, suggesting that open data will close the concept data gap, maintain the credibility of science, exploit the huge data deluge and computational potential, combat fraud, address planetary challenges, support citizen science, respond to citizens' demands for evidence, and restrain the database state. Folks argue about whether open data is good or bad. Of course, in terms of its benefits, it will facilitate diverse analytical perspectives, enable replicable experimental studies, identify errors in research, refine or revise theories, reuse data in order to create further understanding or improve results, stimulate effective collaborative research among scholars across countries and disciplines, and boost investment of research in digital technology. There are some dangers. Folks worry that there's a potential threat to privacy infringement with the unintentional disclosure of personal data. People worry about data theft and academic fraud, as it's easy to cut and paste in open data. Or they worry about the lax quality and control of open data and ethics that potentially could go afoul. Scholarly research has been impacted by collaborative information seeking. In fact, there are a number of portals in which scholars share their resources and work together in groups, and these are just a few of them, and I encourage you to visit a few of these. And then we have traditional metrics for scholarship that you may be aware of, and let's take a look at some of those. Uh, Traditional metrics for scholarship involve the publication of scholarly articles, the presentation and publication of conference papers, invitations to present papers, and the number of citations that your work receives. Bibliometrics is a study of this. It's the statistical analysis of written products of academic inquiry, scholarship, and research, especially in the form of journal articles, books, dissertations, theses, and conference papers. Simply put, it's a set of quantitative methods used to evaluate scholarly literature and scholars. There are article level metrics, which they're measures used to evaluate the impact of an article in a scholarly journal. There's the H index, which is an article level metric that's used to evaluate the impact of journal articles. An author with an index of H has published H papers, each of which has been cited by other papers H times or more. And there are some equations to help us figure that out. There are also journal level metrics. There's the journal impact factor, or JIF or JIF, and it's one measure of journal prestige based on the frequency with which the average article in the journal has been cited in a given period of time. JIF can sometimes be manipulated by authors who cite their own work or play politics by heavily citing the work of peers to increase their research reputation. There's also something known as the eigenfactor. It's a score developed by Jevin West and Carl Bergstrom at the University of Washington, which rates the total importance of a scientific journal according to incoming citations from highly regarded or ranked journals, weighed to make a larger contribution to its eigenfactor than those that are poorly ranked journals. And you'll see these in a number of the sources that are coming up. So we used to have these really thick books that were released in paperback, quarterly editions and bound annually. And these were kind of invented by Eugene Garfield, who is a founder of the bibliometrics movement, who leveraged citation data, how many times an article that you were holding was cited by other scholars or another article that you're interested in. And it helped us follow the citation chain or pearl growing before we had digital resources. It's interesting to note that although Garfield was noted as the founder, Shepard's, which was in the legal world a case citator, preceded things like the Science Citation Index, which Garfield launched in 1964 as a print source, the Social Citation Index, which came afterwards, and the Arts and Humanities Citation Index. These were major tools for librarians back in the old days when I was a baby librarian. But now we've moved to what's called a few sources that measure citations. And one of them is the Web of Science, which I believe many of you looked at in the Rutgers databases earlier in the semester. Web of Science covers a huge core collection, which is not only science, as you can see, it's social science, the Arts and Humanities Citation Index, as I mentioned before, conference proceedings, the Book Citation Index, current chemical reactions, and Index Chemicus. And you can see some of the indexes that are involved in the circle around it. So Web of Science allows you to do a cited reference search. And basically, if you play around in there, you'll discover that it helps you find an author's citation count. It lists papers that cited that author or that article. It notes the times that the article or the author was cited, and it identifies highly cited papers. This is just another look inside, and you can see that very often authors go by a number of names, and you can add all of those names to the search and gather them together. And you can also see some metrics about articles in a very direct way. So when you're working with a researcher and you are the information professional or the librarian, you can kind of discover which are the seminal articles, the ones that are most important to cite in many cases, and who are the seminal authors. Web of Science also has within it journal citation reports, which evaluates journals and their impact factor. You can see that within it, Insights Journal Citation Report, this is within Web of Science, allows you to compare journals and create charts. And also, you can use the eigenfactor, and you can see that that is actually down in that pull-down menu to the very left. You can look at GIFs, you can look at 5-year GIFs, you can look at an immediacy index, or you can look at the eigenfactor or an article influence score. So all of these are journal impacts. Elsevier has Scopus journal metrics, another way to measure a journal's impact. This is a peek inside of Scopus, and Scopus lists a number of ways to look at impact, and you can see that chart, and you can see a number of measures like SJR, IPP, and SNP for measuring journal rankings and impacts. This is just another look inside of Scopus and journals by rank, and you can see on the left that's a list of journals and a ranking number, and you can see that there's a journal number 1, which is Cancer Journal, and then the New England Journal of Medicine is number 2, and Chemical Reviews, and then Lancet and Nature Reviews. These are the journals that people most respect. It's interesting to note that you don't need to be in a database to find this information, although databases contain kind of more of it. But Google Scholar also lists a journal ranking within different areas of study. So the top one there is kind of overall, and then I looked at humanities, literature, and arts in the one that is on the bottom right. And you can see the Journal of Communication is on top in that one. So you can find this outside of databases as well. Similarly, you can find rankings for scholarship. Mine is not very impressive, but this is my Google Scholar profile. Any person who sets up a Google Scholar profile can add citations to it. And actually, that's my ResearchGate profile. This is another collaborative space where people can ask me for the articles that I've written. And if I choose to put my stuff in there, I can do that too. Now, there's so many of these that I don't really do them all. So that's something to think about. Where does a scholar live? They may not live everywhere. And this is a more recent view. And you can see that I can actually see how many citations I've gotten over the course of a number of years. And so 2012 and 2015 were quieter than the other years. Microsoft Academic has something that is a semantic search feature called the paper citation graph. And this is fabulous. This is just one view of it. There's also geographic and timeline views. But this is connects one scholar to another in a web of scholars to see who cites whom. And it's a fascinating way for you to make discoveries about the important people who are publishing in each field and their connections. So those are the traditional measures of bibliometrics, but you need to know that there are possible new metrics coming along. So in addition to those measures that we look at that have a lot to do with citations, what measures now exist in a social media world? Certainly there are article views, but there's also downloads from those social media sources like ResearchGate and other academia.edu, for instance. What about the tweets that people do or tweet about your research, your presentations, and your publications? How many times your blog posts have been viewed? How many times people have commented on your blog posts, specifically when those blog posts talk about your research? What about videos, and especially TED Talks? How many times have your TED Talks been viewed and bookmarked and commented on? What about infographics and research posters that have been viewed or even developed based on your research? How about visits to your CV? How about your SlideShare or Google Slides? How many times have they been viewed and how many times have they been downloaded? How about your collaborations on the various different portals for social scholarship, like Bibsonomy and Mendeley? How about the followers you have on your blog or Twitter, people who have bookmarked your work, conversations around your work on forums, likes and favorites and shares and clicks and all sorts of other ratings? So you see there probably are other ways to measure your impact. And a lot of people are arguing that it's not just bibliometrics, it's not just research impact, but potentially that social impact matters a bit. There was an article that I liked that reinterpreted Ranganathan's 5 Laws of Library Science, which I hope you're familiar with. Books are for use, every reader his or her book, every book its reader, save time of the reader, the library is a growing organism. They reinterpreted that in terms of research impact. Research is for impact. All research impact its artifacts. All research artifacts their impact. Save the time of the researcher, and research impact is itself a growing organism. Let's talk about how research impact may be measured in the future and how it's currently being measured in an emergent way. I'll play a little bit of this video for you.
In the dark hours of the 21st century, scholars rushed to the gates of powerful publishing corporations with the obligation to increase their scientific impact factor with obscure citation counts, opaque and unaccountable methods, mysterious H&M indexes, allowing approximations, gaming, and fatal errors. And as they wait for anonymous reviewers to cast their final vote, 90% are hit by the scythe of rejection. 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 Realizing they can liberate science, pioneering underground scholars engage with the internetatron and peer evaluation. They understand the value of spontaneous sharing. Their communications are dated and stamped by caring hands, encapsulated with portable private or public peer reviewing features, and the dissemination journey may now begin. Communications are automatically indexed by Google Scholar and shared by all on the Twittertron or exported to Mendeley, to Blogatrons, to Facebook, and to you name it. And as crowdsourced dissemination and peer reviewing take their due course, Total Impact uncovers the invisible impact of research, tracking its footprints across Mendeley, PubMed, Dryad, SiteYouLike, PLOS, research blogs, Twitter, Wikipedia, SlideShare, SourceForge, GitHub, and a growing host of non-traditional dissemination channels.
What are altmetrics? Altmetrics are alternative metrics, a new set of metrics that could describe relationships between the social aspects of the web and the spread of scholarship online. It's a new way to capture the impact of articles as well as research products, an alternative to metrics derived purely from a print-based understanding of scholarly research and communication. For example, it's helpful for clinicians and other health professionals who produce various types of research products, like videos, blogs, books, etc., in addition to the scholarly articles they might publish. And altmetrics is emerged because scholars have been upset by the fact that even though their work might be largely funded by public dollars, publishers often own the work of scholars. Scholars' work often is hidden in silos behind login firewalls where people have to pay lots of money in order to access them. There are other measures of social engagement, as you saw in the video, and as we started thinking about together. There's other evidence of impact, social, not just scholarly. The time it takes to make an impact with citations is not immediate. Citations take time to accumulate. Where, for instance, a TED Talk could go viral especially if it talks about somebody's important research. In terms of bibliometrics, there is a discernible bias in terms of STEM, scientific research content, and humanities content doesn't seem to get the same notice. Data now is born digital. Research communication is web native. We're engaging in open science. So why not rethink the way we measure impact? There are a couple of blog posts I did a while back on following scholars on Twitter and the notion that academics are participating in new spaces. The term altmetrics is attributed to Jason Priam. In fact, it was attributed to him in a tweet. He is a doctoral student in North Carolina, I believe, when he tweeted, I like the term alt article level metrics, but it fails to imply diversity of measures. Lately, I'm liking alt metrics. And so Jason Priam went on to found Impact Story, which is one of the spaces that measures research impact or social impact and research impact in new ways. So this is a definition that Jason Priam was responsible for the creation and study of new metrics based on social web for analyzing and informing scholarship. It notes here also that there's a hashtag for altmetrics if you want to follow it. And there are respective groups who are studying it on Mendeley, Google Groups, FriendFeed, and LinkedIn. Priam is also attributed for writing this manifesto about altmetrics, which describes the perceived need for new types of metrics beyond bibliometrics. And among the sites that offer new types of metrics are all of these. And we'll look under the hood at a couple of them. First, let's look at altmetric.com, not to be confused with altmetrics.com. This one is owned by Macmillan, and it offers article level metrics for researchers and publishers. What people know it for is its donuts, and those donuts actually give a score and mean something. You can get background in a number of the charts, you can get the geographical reach, but the donut that you see on the bottom left with a code below it is something that people actually take as a badge.
Hi, we're Altmetric, and we want to help you measure the online impact of digital scholarship. Our article level metrics reflect how often papers are mentioned in blogs, social media, and newspapers. If you're a librarian, you can dive into Altmetric for free with unlimited access to our data browsing app, the Altmetric Explorer. Let's take a quick tour. After logging into the Altmetric Explorer, you'll see the front page, which shows you all of the articles that have been mentioned online in the past day. The circles are called Altmetric donuts. Mouse over them, and you'll see from the legend that each color refers to a different source that the paper has been mentioned in. Light blue, for instance, indicates that a paper was tweeted. Click on one of the donuts, and you'll enter the Altmetric details page. The details page not only shows the metrics and score of attention for the article, but also displays the actual conversations that make up the numbers. If you want to find the attention surrounding a particular set of papers, you can set up search filters. Let's say you want to retrieve articles from University College London that are listed in PubMed. Pick articles that were mentioned anytime, and type in University College London with affiliation in square brackets as a PubMed query. Fetch the PubMed query, and then press Show Matching Articles. Now you can browse through the conversations about a variety of articles written by researchers affiliated with UCL. If you want to access your search results over time, save your filter as a custom report and view it any time. You can even opt to receive email reports daily or weekly and export the metrics to Microsoft Excel for further analysis.
You can also get an altmetric bookmarklet so that when you're browsing the web and you see an article, you can click on the bookmarklet and it will automatically give you a donut with the score of the article you're looking at. In addition to altmetric, you have Plum Analytics, which also measures impact in both you can see the red on the bottom is citations, but also a number of social media impacts. Usage captures mentions and social media. And if you click on any of those within an article, you get one of those windows that you see on the right appear, which gives you analytics in terms of how it was received in that area of impact. And then in addition, you've got Impact Story, which is the one that Jason Priam is associated with, which also, this is an open source tool which helps you analyze the types of mentions that a particular piece of research has. So yes, there are definitely risks and benefits. It's a double-edged sword when you're looking at altmetrics. On campus, people argue about it all the time. People say they don't have time for another type of metric. They don't believe this is recognized as legit. Folks believe this area is in its infancy or maybe it's toddlerhood. There's really actually limited awareness of this measure. There's a bias a bit against public library of science scholarship and crowdsourced evaluation. There's inflexibility relating to harvesting and feed options in terms of a promotion and tenure process. At this point, I believe there are too many competing systems. We've got this data in a whole bunch of different silos depending upon where you as a scholar want to play. There is at this point a lack of standards in the way we're measuring these things and in the metadata. University traditions die hard, and a lot of our scholars do not want to change the way they've measured things for a very long time. And some scholars wonder if it could negatively affect their reputation if they engage in altmetrics activities. There are some concerns that have to do with lack of authority and regulation for quality control. How do we distinguish between good articles and poor articles if popularity is one of the measures? How do we disambiguate authors? As I mentioned, ORCID is a useful way to identify authors with their unique numbers. There's disciplinary variability. Only particular disciplines might really be interested in this kind of academic credentialing. So what's next? Researchers have to ask if altmetrics is really important or just some buzz that's going on right now. Could we correlate between altmetrics and existing measures like bibliometrics, which you saw in many of those portals? Can we predict citations from altmetrics and compare them with expert evaluations? And what is the role of the librarian and the librarian in educating and training researchers, providing objective perspectives on the pros and cons of altmetrics, finding a balance and negotiating between altmetrics and traditional impact metrics? In our discussions this week, I hope you'll take a look at some of these places where scholars either collaborate or where their work is measured in terms of new types of measures. In summary, we looked at credibility and evaluation through an academic lens. We looked at bibliometrics. We looked at altmetrics. We took a little look at gray literature. We looked at social scholarship. We looked at open access and open data. And, of course, the altmetrics movement. And next time we meet, we're going to be talking about teaching and guiding and engaging and how do we get our excitement about search over to our patrons, users, and students. So I will see you in the threads this week, and I'll see you as we talk about designing instruction.